He was just a broken-down ranch hand with calloused hands and a heart full of regret when he found them huddled in that abandoned church at dawn. Twin 7-year-old girls with tear-stained faces and nowhere left to run, cast aside by a stepmother who rode out of town without a backward glance. What started as one moment of conscience would become the greatest blessing Samuel "Sam" Carter never knew he needed, transforming a man who'd lost everything into the father these forgotten souls were desperately praying for. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun painted the Colorado Territory sky in shades of amber and rose as Samuel Carter guided his weathered bay gelding, Rusty, down the dusty main street of Cedar Ridge. The town was just beginning to stir, smoke rising from chimneys, the blacksmith's hammer already ringing against anvil, and the familiar creak of shop doors opening for another day of honest commerce. Sam pulled his worn Stetson lower over his eyes, partly against the early light, but mostly to avoid the knowing looks from townsfolk who remembered when he'd been somebody worth knowing. At 32, Sam was what polite folks called down on his luck, and what honest folks called a man who'd lost his way. 3 years ago, he'd owned a thriving cattle ranch 20 miles north of town, had a beautiful wife named Margaret, and dreams bigger than the endless Colorado sky. Then the drought came, lasting 2 brutal years and taking first his cattle, then his land, and finally his wife, though Margaret had left for reasons that cut deeper than any financial ruin. She'd wanted children, had begged for them, and when the doctor finally told them it would never happen, something in their marriage had withered like grass in that merciless sun. Now Sam worked whatever jobs he could find, breaking horses for other men's ranches, mending fences, driving cattle to market for wages that barely kept him and Rusty fed. He'd been riding since before dawn, returning from a week-long job helping move a herd to the railroad town of Silver Creek, his saddlebags containing $23 in silver coins and the bone-deep exhaustion that came from trying to outrun memories on horseback. The old church sat at the edge of town, abandoned since the new one had been built closer to the town center 5 years back. Its white paint was peeling, and weeds grew tall around the foundation, but the structure was sound enough. Sam had ridden past it 1,000 times, barely giving it a glance, but this morning something was different. Rusty's ears pricked forward, and the horse nickered softly, the way he did when he sensed something that needed attention. That's when Sam heard it, a sound that didn't belong in the crisp morning air. Crying. Not the robust wailing of a child with a scraped knee, but something quieter, more desperate, the kind of weeping that spoke of deep hurt and lost hope, a sound that reached back through the years and grabbed Sam by the throat with recognition. Sam had made that sound once, at age 9, when his own parents had died of fever and left him to fend for himself until a kindly rancher named Joshua Henley had taken him in. He'd learned early that tears were a luxury most folks couldn't afford, that strength was something you put on like clothes every morning, whether you felt it or not. But he also remembered how it felt to believe that no one in the world cared. Whether you lived or died, Rusty snorted and tossed his head, as if sensing his rider's internal struggle. Sam could keep riding, head to the boarding house for a hot meal and a bath, pretend he'd never heard anything. In 12 hours, he'd probably forget this place existed. But the crying continued, soft and heartbroken, and Sam found himself dismounting and tying Rusty's reins to the church's hitching post. The front door of the church was slightly ajar, hanging crooked on old hinges. Sam pushed it open carefully, the wood creaking in protest. Inside, dusty shafts of sunlight streamed through stained glass windows that hadn't been cleaned in years, casting colored patterns across empty pews and a bare altar. The crying was coming from the front of the church, near what had once been the pulpit. "Hello?" Sam called softly, his voice echoing in the empty space. "Is someone there?" The crying stopped abruptly, replaced by the kind of silence that screamed louder than any noise. Sam removed his hat out of old habit, even in this abandoned house of God, and walked slowly down the center aisle. "I heard crying," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "If someone's hurt, I'd like to help." More silence. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, a small voice. "Go away, mister." It was a child's voice, high and sweet, despite the fear in it. Probably no older than 7 or 8. Sam's heart clenched like a fist around a hot coal. He stopped walking and crouched down, making himself smaller and less threatening. "I'm not going to hurt you, little one," he said. "My name's Sam. What's yours?" The silence stretched so long that Sam began to wonder if he'd imagined the voice. Then, barely above a whisper, "Isabella." "That's a real pretty name, Isabella. Are you hurt?" "No, sir." The voice came from behind the old pulpit where someone small could easily hide in the shadows. "Are you alone?" A pause. "No, sir. My sister's here too. 2 children, hiding in an abandoned church." Sam felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What's your sister's name?" "Sophia. We're twins." "Well, Isabella and Sophia, I'm mighty pleased to meet you both. Mind if I ask what you're doing here? All by yourselves?" The question triggered a fresh wave of quiet sobbing, and Sam immediately knew he'd stepped on a landmine. He waited for the crying to subside before trying again. "That's all right. We don't have to talk about that just yet. Are you girls cold? It's still plenty chilly in the mornings." "Yes, sir." Isabella's voice was stronger now, but still shaky. "Hungry?" A longer pause. "Yes, sir." Sam's mind raced. 2 little girls, alone in an abandoned church, cold and hungry, and clearly terrified. Every protective instinct he'd buried under years of loneliness and self-pity came roaring to the surface like a flash flood in a dry creek bed. "Isabella, I'm going to walk into town and get some food. When I come back, maybe you can tell me what's going on and we can figure out how to help you and Sophia. Does that sound fair?" No answer, but no refusal either. Sam took that as progress. The general store was just opening when Sam pushed through the door, the bell above jangling his arrival. Moses Hartwell, the proprietor, looked up from arranging items behind the counter and nodded in greeting. "Morning, Sam. Heard you were out with the Silver Creek Drive. How'd it go?" "Well enough, Moses. Need to pick up some supplies." Sam gathered crackers, jerky, canned peaches, and 2 bottles of milk, acutely aware of how his carefully hoarded $23 was about to become significantly less. He also grabbed 2 small blankets from Moses's modest selection of dry goods. Moses rang up the purchases with the curiosity of a man who'd been watching the comings and goings of Cedar Ridge for 30 years. "Planning a picnic, Sam?" "Little early in the season for that." "Something like that," Sam replied, counting out coins and avoiding the older man's knowing gaze. When Sam returned to the church, he could hear whispered conversation coming from behind the pulpit. He approached slowly, placing the supplies where the girls could see them. "I've got some food here," he said. "Crackers and jerky, canned peaches, fresh milk, and some blankets too. You don't have to come out, but it's here if you want it." More whispered conversation, this time in what sounded like Spanish. Then Isabella's voice, cautious but curious. "What kind of peaches?" "Yellow cling peaches in syrup, sweet as candy." A small hand appeared around the edge of the pulpit, followed by a thin arm in a torn blue dress. Sam's heart broke a little at how delicate the arm was, how the dress was too small and mended with uneven stitches. The hand grabbed the can of peaches and disappeared back behind the pulpit. For the next few minutes, Sam listened to the sounds of quiet eating and muffled conversation. The church felt less empty now, filled with the simple sounds of children being children. Finally, Isabella spoke again. "Thank you, mister." "You're welcome, Isabella. Feel better with some food in you?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Now, I know you might, Not want to talk about this, but I need to know. Are you and Sophia safe? Is someone looking for you? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken pain. When Isabella finally spoke, her voice was so small, Sam had to strain to hear it. She left us 2 words that contained a universe of abandonment and fear. Sam felt something crack inside his chest, a familiar ache he'd spent years learning to ignore. Who left you, sweetheart? Our stepmother, Miss Linda. She said we were nothing but trouble and she was tired of taking care of children that weren't her blood. She rode out yesterday morning and told us not to follow her. Sam closed his eyes and leaned back against a pew. He thought about every adult who had ever walked away from him, every promise that had been broken, every time he'd been told he was more trouble than he was worth. How long have you been here? Since yesterday. We didn't know where else to go. Papa always said churches were safe places. A full day and night. These 2 little girls had been alone in an abandoned church for a full day and night, probably terrified that someone would find them and take them somewhere even worse than where they'd been. Isabella, where's your papa? Your real papa? More crying, softer this time. He died, sir, got kicked by a horse and never woke up. That's when we had to go live with Miss Linda, but she never wanted us. She said we were just extra mouths to feed and reminded her of everything she didn't like about papa. Sam's hands clenched into fists where they rested on his knees. He thought about Linda, whoever she was, riding away from 2 7-year-old girls. He thought about how scared they must have been, how cold and hungry and alone. He thought about himself at 9 years old, standing beside his parents' graves, wondering if anyone in the world would ever want him. Isabella, Sophia, he said, his voice steadier than he felt, I want you to listen to me real careful. You are not trouble. You are not extra mouths to feed. And you are not alone anymore, you understand? We're going to figure this out. You going to take us to the sheriff? Isabella's voice was thick with fear. Sam paused. He should take them to Sheriff Morrison. That was the right thing to do, the legal thing to do. These girls needed to be placed somewhere proper and legal and safe. But Sam knew what happened to orphaned children in small frontier towns. If they were lucky, they'd be sent to an orphanage. In back east, more likely they'd be placed with whoever was willing to take them, and willing didn't always mean kind. Not right now, he heard himself say. Right now, we're just going to focus on getting you warm and fed and safe. Everything else we can figure out later. You're not going to leave us. The question hit Sam like a physical blow. He thought about his empty room at the boarding house, his meager savings, his uncertain future. He thought about how unprepared he was to take care of 2 traumatized children, how he barely knew how to take care of himself most days. No, he said, and meant it completely. I'm not going to leave you. Another whispered conversation in Spanish, longer this time. Then Isabella's voice, tentative. Can we see you, sir? Your face, I mean. Sam moved closer to the pulpit, careful, not to cross into their hiding space, but close enough that the girls could see him if they wanted to. After a moment, 2 small faces appeared around the edge of the wooden structure. Identical, except for the way fear had settled differently. In their dark eyes, they were beautiful children, despite the exhaustion and terror written across their features. Isabella, who had been doing most of the talking, had shoulder-length black hair that needed washing and a heart-shaped face that would have been quick to smile under different circumstances. Sophia, slightly smaller and quieter, had the same features, but with longer hair that was tangled and partially covering a dark bruise on her left temple that made Sam's vision go red around the edges. "Hello there," Sam said softly, managing a smile despite the rage building in his chest. "I'm Sam Carter. It's real nice to meet you both officially." The girls studied his face with the intensity of children who had learned to read adults for signs of danger. Whatever they saw, there must have passed some test, because Sophia spoke for the first time. "You have kind eyes, Mr. Sam." Sam felt something break and rebuild itself inside his chest all at once. "Thank you, Sophia. You both have beautiful eyes too, pretty as your mama's, I'd wager." "Mama died when we were babies," Isabella said matter-of-factly. "Papa raised us by himself until the horse accident." Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Two little girls who had lost their mother as infants, their father as children, and now been abandoned by the only adult left in their world. Sam wondered how they had managed to maintain any trust in grown-ups at all. "Well," Sam said carefully, "your papa must have been a good man to raise such polite, brave girls." Both girls smiled at that, real smiles that transformed their entire faces. Sophia ducked her head shyly, but Isabella sat up a little straighter. "He was the best papa in the whole world," she said with fierce pride. "He taught us to read and write, and he sang to us every night, and he said we were his little angels sent from heaven." "Then he was right," Sam said simply. "And you still are?" They sat there for a moment, looking at each other across the dusty space of the abandoned church, three strangers whose lives were about to become permanently entangled. Sam could feel the weight of the decision hanging in the air, could feel the exact moment when not walking away became something bigger, something that would change everything. "Isabella, Sophia," he said finally, "it's getting warm in here with the sun coming up, and I reckon you could use some real food and a proper place to rest. I've got a room at the boarding house in town, and Mrs. O'Brien serves up the finest meals this side of Denver. Would you like to come with me? We can get you cleaned up, fed proper, and figure out what to do next." The girls looked at each other, having an entire conversation without words in the way that twins sometimes could. Finally, Isabella nodded. "Yes, sir," she said, "but we stay together, always together." "Always together," Sam agreed. "That's not negotiable." It took another 10 minutes to coax them fully out from behind the pulpit. They moved like wild animals who'd been hunted, constantly checking over their shoulders, never more than arm's length from each other. Sam gathered their few possessions, a small cloth bundle with some clothes, a wooden doll that Sophia clutched like a lifeline, and a leather pouch containing what looked like important papers. The walk to where Rusty waited felt like a journey across dangerous territory. The girls flinched at every sound, every shadow, every movement in their peripheral vision. Sam found himself moving slowly, explaining everything he was doing in a calm, steady voice. Here's my horse, Rusty. He's gentle as a lamb and twice as smart as most people. You don't have to worry about him. He's carried children before." Isabella stepped forward first, reaching out a tentative hand to touch Rusty's neck. The old gelding lowered his head and blew softly through his nostrils, and Isabella giggled, the first truly happy sound Sam had heard from her. "He likes you," Sam observed. Rusty's a good judge of character. Getting two small children and one adult onto a horse meant for one rider required some creative thinking. Sam mounted first, then carefully lifted each girl up to sit in front of him, one on each side of the saddle horn. They were so small they barely took up any space, but Sam could feel them trembling as Rusty began to move. "Easy now," he murmured, one arm around each girl. "Rusty here's been carrying folks safe for 15 years. He's not about to start dropping passengers now." The ride into town took 20 minutes. 20 minutes during which Sam tried to figure out what the hell he was going to do next. Mrs. O'Brien's boarding house had strict rules about children, and his room was barely big enough for one person, let alone three. He had enough money for maybe a week of meals for all of them. And then what? But as they rode down Main Street and he felt Isabella and Sophia gradually relax against him, saw them looking around with wonder at the bustle of town life, Sam realized that figuring it out was exactly what he was going to do. These girls needed someone to choose them, to fight for them. to prove that not every adult in their lives would walk away when things got difficult. "Mr. Sam?" Sophia's voice was so quiet he almost missed it over the clip-clop of Rusty's hooves on the packed dirt road. "Yes, sweetheart? Are you going to be our papa now?" The question hit Sam like a bolt of lightning, simple and profound and terrifying all at once. He thought about Margaret, about the children they'd never had, about the empty spaces in his life that he'd learned to navigate around like furniture in a dark room. "Would you like that?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Both girls nodded against his chest, and Sam felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. The stirring of hope, fragile as a newborn colt, but unmistakably real. "Then yes," he said, and felt those walls around his heart begin to crumble like old adobe in a rainstorm. "I reckon I am." Mrs. O'Brien's boarding house sat on the corner of Main and Church Streets, a 2-story wooden building painted cheerful yellow with white trim and flower boxes under every window. Sam had been living there for 6 months, renting a small room on the 2nd floor and taking his meals in the communal dining room with the other residents, mostly traveling salesmen, railroad workers, and men like himself who found themselves between better circumstances. Eleanor O'Brien was a widow in her 50s who ran her establishment with firm kindness and an eagle eye for trouble. She'd taken Sam in when other landlords had turned him away, perhaps seeing something in his quiet dignity that convinced her he was down on his luck rather than down on character. But Sam had never brought children to her boarding house, had never asked for anything beyond the basic room and board his wages could cover. As he helped Isabella and Sophia down from Rusty's back, Sam could see Mrs. O'Brien watching from the front porch, her grey hair pinned back severely and her arms crossed in a way that suggested he had some explaining to do. She was a kind woman, but she had rules, and those rules had kept her boarding house respectable and profitable for 15 years. "Mr. Carter," she said as Sam approached with a girl holding each of his hands, "I believe we need to have a conversation." "Yes, ma'am, we do," Sam replied, removing his hat with his free hand. "Mrs. O'Brien, I'd like you to meet Isabella and Sophia. Girls, this is Mrs. O'Brien. She runs the finest boarding house in Colorado Territory." Mrs. O'Brien's stern expression softened slightly as she looked at the twins. Her trained eye took in the mended dresses, the 2 thin faces, the way they pressed close to Sam like he was their only anchor in a stormy world. "Well," she said after a moment, "they certainly have lovely manners. Good morning, girls." "Good morning, Mum," Isabella and Sophia chorused, dropping small curtsies that made Sam's heart clench with pride. "Perhaps," Mrs. O'Brien continued, "we should discuss this inside. I believe breakfast is still being served." The boarding house dining room was warm and bright, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh biscuits and bacon filling the air. Most of the other residents had already finished their meals and headed off to their daily work, leaving just Sam and the girls at a corner table, while Mrs. O'Brien bustled about serving plates piled high with more food than Isabella and Sophia had probably seen in weeks. Sam watched the girls eat with the focused intensity of children who had been truly hungry, but he noticed they were careful to eat slowly, to use their napkins, to say please and thank you. These were children who had been taught proper manners and were determined to prove they deserved kindness. "Now then," Mrs. O'Brien said, settling into a chair across from them with a cup of coffee, "suppose you tell me how you came to be traveling with these young ladies, Mr. Carter." Sam had been dreading this moment, but he met her gaze steadily. "Found them in the old church this morning, ma'am. Their stepmother abandoned them yesterday. Their fathers passed on." Mrs. O'Brien's expression grew troubled. "Abandoned them? In my day, that would have been grounds for criminal charges. Yes, ma'am, I expect it still is. But right now, these girls need somewhere safe to stay while we figure out the proper course of action." "And you've appointed yourself their guardian?" Sam glanced at Isabella and Sophia, who were listening to every word while pretending to focus on their breakfast. "I've appointed myself their protector, ma'am, for as long as they need one." Mrs. O'Brien studied his face for a long moment, and Sam had the feeling he was being weighed and measured against some internal standard. Finally, she nodded. "Room and board for 3 will cost more than what you're paying now, Mr. Carter." "I understand, ma'am. I'll find a way to cover it. See that you do. And Mr. Carter, those girls will need proper clothes, shoes that fit, and schooling. If you're serious about this, you'll need to be serious about all of it." "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. O'Brien reached across the table and gently touched Sophia's hand. "Well then, girls, it looks like you'll be staying with us for a while. I have some rules about children in my house, but they're all sensible rules designed to keep everyone safe and happy." Isabella looked up from her plate. "We're very good, Mrs. O'Brien. We won't cause any trouble." "I can see that, dear. And troubles. Not what I'm worried about. What I'm worried about is making sure you feel at home." After breakfast, Mrs. O'Brien showed them to a larger room on the 2nd floor, still modest, but with space for a second bed and a window that looked out over the town's main street. She produced clean nightgowns that had belonged to her own daughter, grown now and living back east, and promised to speak with the seamstress about proper day dresses. "Mrs. O'Brien," Sam said as the older woman prepared to leave them to get settled, "I want you to know I'm good for the money. I'll pick up extra work, whatever it takes." She paused in the doorway and gave him a look that was part sternness, part approval. "Mr. Carter, in my experience, a man who'll take in orphaned children isn't the type to run out on his debts. Besides," she added with a slight smile, "this house has been too quiet lately. A little laughter might do us all some good." After Mrs. O'Brien left, Sam found himself alone with Isabella and Sophia for the first time since the church. The girls sat on the edge of one of the beds, looking around the room with wonder at luxuries like clean sheets and glass windows and electric lights. "This is really where we're going to live?" Sophia asked, her voice filled with amazement. "For now," Sam said, settling into the room's single chair, "until we can figure out something more permanent." "What's more permanent?" Isabella asked, and Sam realized she was asking whether they would be staying together, whether this unexpected refuge was temporary charity or something that might last. Sam looked at these 2 little girls who had been thrown away like unwanted possessions, who had spent a day and night alone and terrified, who were now trusting a complete stranger because they had no other choice. He thought about his empty life, his carefully constructed solitude, his determination to never again care about anything enough to be hurt by its loss. "Well," he said slowly, "I was thinking we might look into finding a little house somewhere. Nothing fancy, but somewhere with room for all of us. Somewhere with a yard where you could play, maybe keep a dog if you wanted." Both girls' eyes went wide. "A real house?" Isabella whispered. "With a dog?" "If that's what you'd like." Sophia bounced slightly on the bed. "Could we have a garden? Papa taught us about growing things. I reckon a garden would be real nice." They talked for another hour about dreams and possibilities, about the kind of life they might build together. Sam found himself making promises he wasn't sure he could keep, but the hope in the girls' faces made every word feel like truth. These children had been denied so much, love, security, the simple promise of tomorrow, that even the possibility of a normal childhood felt like a miracle. As the afternoon wore on and the girls finally succumbed to exhaustion, curling up together, on the bed like 2 puppies, Sam sat by the window and watched the town go about its business. He thought about the choices that had brought him to this moment, about the man he'd been and the man he might become. 3 days ago, he'd been Samuel Carter, failed rancher and hired hand, a man with no family and no real purpose beyond surviving until tomorrow. Now he was something else entirely. A father, a protector, a man with 2 little girls depending on him to be better than he'd ever believed he could be. And for the first time in 3 years, Sam found himself looking forward to tomorrow. The First week at Mrs. O'Brien's boarding house passed like a careful dance between hope and uncertainty. Sam found himself walking on eggshells around Isabella and Sophia, terrified that one wrong move might shatter the fragile trust they'd begun to place in him. The girls, for their part, seemed equally cautious, as if they were waiting for the other shoe to drop, for this kind stranger to reveal himself as just another adult who would eventually walk away. Sam had never realized how loud silence could be until he found himself responsible for two children who spoke in whispers when they thought he couldn't hear them. They were polite to the point of heartbreak, always saying please and thank you and yes sir and no sir, as if good manners might somehow guarantee their continued welcome. They ate whatever was put in front of them without complaint, made their beds with military precision, and seemed determined to take up as little space as possible in the world. It was Sophia who broke first. On the fourth morning, as Sam was getting ready to head out for a day's work, breaking horses at the Miller Ranch, he found her sitting by the window, tears streaming silently down her face as she watched him prepare to leave. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Sam asked, crouching down beside her chair. "Are you coming back?" The question was so small, so filled with the weight of previous abandonment, that Sam felt his heart crack right down the middle. "Of course I'm coming back. Why would you think I wouldn't?" Sophia's lower lip trembled. "Because that's what grown-ups do. They leave and they don't come back, and they tell you they will, but they don't really mean it." Sam sat down heavily on the floor beside her chair, suddenly understanding the magnitude of what he'd taken on. These weren't just two children who needed a roof over their heads and 3 meals a day. These were two little souls who had been systematically taught that love was conditional, that adults were unreliable, that safety was always temporary. "Sophia, look at me," Sam said gently. When her dark eyes met his, he continued, "I'm going to make you a promise, and I want you to listen real careful. I will always come back. Every single day that I leave this house, I will come back to you and Isabella. The only way I wouldn't come back is if something happened to me that was completely out of my control. And even then, I'd fight heaven and earth to get back to you girls." Sophia studied his face with the intensity of a 7-year-old who had learned to read adults for signs of deception. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied some internal test, because she nodded slowly. "Promise? I promise. Cross my heart and hope to die." From that day forward, Sam established a routine that became as sacred as Sunday church. Every morning before he left for work, he would sit with both girls and tell them exactly where he was going, what he would be doing, and what time he expected to return. Every evening he came home with a small token, a pretty rock he'd found, a wildflower, sometimes just a story about something interesting that had happened during his day. The breakthrough with Isabella came differently. She was the protector, the one who had appointed herself responsible for Sophia's well-being, and she watched Sam with the calculating gaze of someone far older than her 7 years. She tested him in small ways, forgetting to say please, to see if he would correct her harshly, spilling water on the floor to see if he would lose his temper, asking for things she was sure would be refused. Sam passed each test with patience. He didn't know he possessed. When Isabella forgot her manners, he gently reminded her. When accidents happened, he helped clean up without a word of criticism. When she asked for seemingly impossible things, like wanting to learn to read better or wondering if they could visit their father's grave someday, Sam simply said, "We'll figure it out." The real turning point came on a Saturday morning when Sam had no work scheduled. He'd been planning to spend the day looking for additional employment opportunities, but when he mentioned his plans at breakfast, both girls' faces fell in a way that made his chest tight. "Would you rather I stayed here today?" he asked, and the way their faces lit up told him everything he needed to know about his priorities. Instead of job hunting, Sam spent the morning teaching the girls to play checkers with a set Mrs. O'Brien had found in the boarding house's common room. Isabella proved to be fiercely competitive, studying the board with serious concentration and whooping with joy when she managed to jump one of Sam's pieces. Sophia preferred to arrange her pieces in pretty patterns rather than focus on winning. And when Sam gently suggested she might want to try a different strategy, she looked up at him with complete trust and said, "I like making things beautiful more than I like winning." In that moment, Sam realized these girls weren't just healing from abandonment. They were discovering who they were when they felt safe enough to be themselves. Isabella was a strategist, a leader, someone who met challenges head-on. Sophia was an artist, a dreamer, someone who saw beauty in the world despite everything she'd endured. The afternoon brought their first real crisis. The town's other children had begun to notice the twins, and not all of the attention was kind. A group of older boys, led by a bratty 12-year-old named Marcus Hoffman, whose father owned the bank, had cornered Isabella and Sophia behind the general store while Sam was inside purchasing supplies. "Look what we got here," Marcus was saying. When Sam emerged from the store, a couple of little Mexican orphans playing dress-up in white girl clothes. Isabella stood protectively in front of Sophia, her small fists clenched at her sides. "We're not Mexican, and these are our clothes now." "Your clothes?" Marcus laughed meanly. "Everybody knows you're just charity cases. My pa says Sam Carter's probably just keeping you around to do his chores. And when he gets tired of feeding you, he'll dump you at the orphanage in Denver." Sam saw red. The bag of supplies fell from his hands as he strode over to where the boys had the girls trapped against a stack of wooden crates. "Marcus Hoffman." Sam's voice was deadly quiet. "I suggest you step away from these young ladies right now." Marcus spun around, his face going pale when he saw the look in Sam's eyes. "We weren't doing nothing, Mr. Carter, just talking. I heard what kind of talking you were doing, and I'm going to give you some advice that might save you a world of hurt down the road. You don't ever, and I mean ever, say cruel things to children who've already been hurt enough. You understand me?" "Yes, sir," Marcus mumbled, suddenly finding the ground very interesting. Now apologized to Isabella and Sophia. "Sorry," Marcus muttered, then scampered off with his friends trailing behind. Sam knelt down in front of the twins, checking them over for any signs of physical hurt. "You girls all right?" Isabella nodded, but Sam could see she was shaking slightly. Sophia had tears in her eyes, but was trying hard not to cry. "Did what he said hurt your feelings?" Sam asked gently. "A little," Isabella admitted. "Are we really just charity cases?" Sam gathered both girls into his arms, holding them tight against his chest. "Listen to me very carefully. You are not charity cases. You are not burdens. You are not temporary guests in my life. You are my girls, and anyone who suggests otherwise is going to have to answer to me. Is that clear?" Both girls nodded against his shirt, and Sam felt something shift and settle in his chest. This wasn't about doing the right thing anymore or helping children in need. This was about family. Messy, complicated, chosen family, but family nonetheless. That evening, Sam sat down at the small desk in their room and did something he hadn't done since Margaret left. He wrote a letter. Not to Margaret, but to a lawyer he'd heard about in Denver, inquiring about the legal process for adopting orphaned children. If he was going to be these girls' father, he wanted it to be official and permanent and unshakable. The next challenge came from an unexpected source. Dr. Harrison Whitmore, the town's physician, and a man who had never shown much interest in Sam's affairs, appeared at Mrs. O'Brien's boarding house on a Tuesday evening, requesting to speak with him privately. "Mr. Carter," Dr. Whitmore said as they stood on the front porch, "I understand you've taken in the Rodriguez children. Their names are Isabella and Sophia. And yes, I have." "I see. And what exactly are your qualifications for caring for traumatized children?" Sam bristled at the man's tone. I care about them. I provide for them. I keep them safe. What other qualifications do I need? Dr. Whitmore adjusted his spectacles. Mr. Carter, these children have been through significant trauma. They need proper medical evaluation, psychological assessment, and placement with a family equipped to handle their special needs. Their special needs are love, security, and someone who won't give up on them. I can provide all three. You're a ranch hand with no permanent employment and no experience with children. Surely you can see that your enthusiasm doesn't qualify you to raise two little girls. Sam stepped closer to the doctor, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Dr. Whitmore, let me make something clear. Those girls upstairs have been passed around, abandoned and treated like unwanted baggage for the last time. They're staying with me, and if you or anyone else tries to take them away, you'll find out just how unqualified I can be. Dr. Whitmore retreated slightly. I'm simply concerned about their welfare. Their welfare is fine. Their welfare has never been better. And if you're genuinely concerned about children in this town, maybe you should focus on the ones whose fathers beat them or whose mothers drink too much, instead of harassing the ones who finally found someone who gives a damn. The doctor left without another word, but Sam knew the encounter was a warning. Not everyone in Cedar Ridge approved of his unconventional family arrangement, and there would be others who questioned his right to raise Isabella and Sophia. That night, he sat the girls down and explained, in terms they could understand, that some people might try to suggest they would be better off somewhere else. But we want to stay with you, Sophia said, her voice small but determined. And I want you to stay with me. But I need you both to understand that if anyone, a doctor, a sheriff, anyone in a position of authority, asks you questions about how I treat you, it's very important that you tell the truth. Isabella's eyes went wide. Are you in trouble? No, sweetheart. But some people think that because I'm not married and I don't have much money, I might not be the best person to take care of you. So if anyone asks, you just tell them exactly how things are, okay? Both girls nodded solemnly, and Sam realized he was asking 7-year-olds to potentially testify on his behalf. The weight of responsibility felt crushing and exhilarating at the same time. The test came sooner than expected. Sheriff Morrison, a fair man who had known Sam for years, appeared at the boarding house the following afternoon with a worried expression and a formal air that suggested this wasn't a social call. Sam, he said, removing his hat as Mrs. O'Brien led him into the parlor where Sam was helping the girls with their letters. I need to have a word with you and the children. Sam's heart sank, but he kept his voice steady. Of course, Sheriff. Girls, this is Sheriff Morrison. He's one of the good men who helps keep our town safe. Sheriff Morrison knelt down to the girls' level, his manner gentle but official. Hello, Isabella. Hello, Sophia. I just need to ask you a few questions, all right? Both girls nodded, pressing closer to Sam's sides. Are you happy living here with Mr. Carter? Yes, sir, Isabella said immediately. He's the best papa we could have asked for. Papa? Sheriff Morrison glanced at Sam, who felt his face flush. That's what they call me, Sam said quietly. And does Papa take good care of you? Do you have enough food, warm clothes, a safe place to sleep? Oh, yes, sir, Sophia chimed in. Papa makes sure we have everything we need, and he reads to us every night, and he's teaching us to play checkers, and he promised to take us to sea, where our real Papa is buried when the weather gets warmer. Has Papa ever hurt you or made you feel scared? Both girls shook their heads emphatically. Papa would never hurt anyone, Isabella said with complete conviction. He's the kindest man in the whole world. Sheriff Morrison stood up, his expression thoughtful. Mr. Carter, could I speak with you outside? Sam's mouth went dry, but he squeezed both girls' hands. I'll be right back. Mrs. O'Brien's going to stay with you, all right? On the porch, Sheriff Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, "Sam, I've known you for 3 years. You're a good man who's had some bad luck. But taking in 2 children, that's a big responsibility." "I know that, Sheriff." Dr. Whitmore seems to think these girls would be better off in a proper family situation. Maybe with the Hendersons. They've been talking about adopting. Sam's blood ran cold. The Hendersons were fine people, but they already had 4 children of their own and a farm that demanded every waking hour. Isabella and Sophia would be well cared for, but they'd be 2 more children in a busy household, not the cherished daughters they deserved to be. "Sheriff, with all due respect, those girls have been separated from everyone they loved enough times. They're not going anywhere unless you drag them out of here in chains." Sheriff Morrison sighed. "Sam, I'm not here to take them away. I'm here because it's my job to make sure they're safe and well cared for, and from what I can see, they are. But you need to understand, if you're serious about this, you need to make it legal. Get the paperwork filed, make yourself their official guardian, because there are going to be more people like Dr. Whitmore asking questions." Relief flooded through Sam like a river breaking through a dam. "I've already written to a lawyer in Denver about adoption proceedings." "Good. And Sam, those girls obviously adore you. Don't let anyone tell you that love isn't qualification enough." That evening, as Sam helped Isabella and Sophia get ready for bed, he realized they had passed their first official test. But more importantly, he had learned something about himself. He would fight anyone and everyone who tried to separate this family he was building one day at a time. "Papa?" Sophia asked as he tucked her in. "Are you really going to adopt us?" "If you'll have me as your forever papa, then yes." Isabella sat up in bed. "Does that mean we'll have the same last name as you? Would you like that?" Both girls nodded enthusiastically. "Isabella Carter," Isabella said, trying it out. "Sophia Carter." "That sounds perfect to me," Sam said, and meant every word. As he'd blew out the lamp and settled into his own bed, Sam listened to the soft sounds of the girls whispering to each other in the darkness. They were planning something, a surprise for him from what he could gather, and the casual way they included him in their future plans told him everything he needed to know about how far they'd all come. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a man with no family and no real purpose. Now he was papa to 2 little girls who had taught him that love wasn't something you fell into by accident. It was something you chose. Every single day, even when it was hard, even when it was scary, even when you had no idea what you were doing, and tomorrow he would choose it again. Winter came early to Cedar Ridge that year, sweeping down from the mountains with a ferocity that caught even the old-timers by surprise. By November, snow lay 3 feet deep in the streets, and the wind howled through the gaps in building walls like a living thing searching for warmth. Sam found himself facing the harsh reality that his meager savings and irregular work weren't going to be enough to keep 3 people fed and warm through the brutal Colorado winter. The crisis struck on a Tuesday morning when Sam woke to find ice crystals covering the inside of their window, and both girls shivering, despite being buried under every blanket they owned. The small coal stove that heated their room had burned through their fuel supply faster than expected, and Sam's last paying job had ended a week ago when the Miller Ranch finished their seasonal horsebreaking. "Papa, I can see my breath," Sophia said wonderingly, not complaining, but simply observing the white puffs that accompanied her words. Sam's heart clenched as he watched Isabella quietly wrap her own thin shawl around her sister's shoulders, the protective gesture becoming as natural as breathing. These girls never complained, never demanded, never made him feel guilty about the limitations of what he could provide. But their uncomplaining acceptance made his failures feel even more acute. "I know, sweetheart," Sam said, forcing cheerfulness. into his voice as he stirred the dead coals in the stove. "We'll get this warmed up in no time," but there were no more coals. Sam had burned the last of their fuel during the night, and his wallet contained exactly $4.37. Not enough for coal, not enough for proper winter clothes for the girls, barely enough for food for the rest of the week. Mrs. O'Brien's boarding house had been struggling too. 3 of her regular tenants had left town when the early winter made construction work impossible, and she'd been forced to reduce the size of meals and delay repairs that the building desperately needed. Sam knew she was carrying him on credit, trusting that he'd find work soon enough to pay what he owed, as Sam prepared to venture out into the bitter cold to look for any available work, shoveling snow, splitting wood, anything that might earn a few dollars. He found a letter that had been slipped under their door sometime during the night. His name was written on the envelope in elegant handwriting that seemed oddly familiar, though he couldn't place where he might have seen it before. Inside was a brief note written on expensive paper in the same careful script. "The Mercantile has received a shipment of winter supplies under your account. The children should not suffer for the sins of adults who failed them. A friend." Sam read the note 3 times, his hands trembling slightly from cold and confusion. He'd never opened an account at Patterson's Mercantile, had never had enough steady income to warrant such an arrangement. But when he dressed quickly and made his way through the knee-deep snow to the store, proprietor Jacob Patterson greeted him with a knowing smile. "Ah, Mr. Carter, I was wondering when you'd come by. Your benefactor was quite specific about what you'd need." Patterson led him to a corner of the store where a substantial pile of goods waited. 2 thick wool coats sized for small girls, winter, boots, warm stockings, enough coal to last a month, and a crate of preserved foods that would keep them fed regardless of Sam's employment situation. "Who paid for this?" Sam asked, his pride warring with his desperate gratitude. Patterson shrugged. "Money came through the bank with instructions. Anonymous donor, legal as Sunday service. Asked me not to make a fuss about it, just to make sure. You and those girls had what you needed." Sam stared at the supplies, overwhelmed by the generosity and mystified by the source. "Did they say anything else?" "Just that you'd earned this kindness, and the children deserved a proper winter." That evening, as Isabella and Sophia modeled their new coats and boots with the excitement of children who had learned not to expect such gifts, Sam found himself staring out the window at the snow-covered town, wondering who in Cedar Ridge had both the means and the motivation to help them so substantially. The mysterious assistance didn't stop there. Over the following weeks, Sam discovered that his room and board at Mrs. O'Brien's had been paid through the end of winter. The town's school teacher, Miss Catherine Brennan, mentioned that an anonymous donation had covered school supplies and books for the Carter girls, as the town had begun calling them. Even Dr. Whitmore, who had been so skeptical of Sam's qualifications as a guardian, grudgingly admitted that someone had prepaid for any medical care the children might need. "Whoever your benefactor is," Dr. Whitmore said during a routine checkup for the girls, "they're certainly thorough and expensive. This kind of comprehensive support doesn't come cheap." Sam's attempts to investigate the source of their good fortune led nowhere. The bank manager, Harold Hoffman, Marcus's father and a man who had never shown Sam any particular favor, claimed ignorance about the identity of the donor. Sheriff Morrison, when asked discreetly, simply shrugged and suggested that Sam should be grateful for his good luck rather than questioning it. The truth began to emerge in the most unexpected way. Sam had taken a temporary job helping the blacksmith, Thomas Mueller, during an unusually busy period when several ranches needed emergency repairs on equipment damaged by the harsh weather. Mueller, a German immigrant with a talent for metalwork and a tendency toward gossip, mentioned something that made Sam's blood run cold. "Heard from my cousin in Denver," Muller said as they worked together, reshaping a broken wagon axle. Says, "There's been inquiries about you and those girls. Someone paying good money for information about how you're treating them, whether they're happy, whether you're a good father to them." Sam's hammer missed its target entirely. What kind of inquiries? The expensive kind. Professional investigators, lawyers, people who get paid to find things out. "My cousin works for a law firm, says a woman came in asking about adoption procedures, specifically about cases involving abandoned children and single men." Muller paused his work. "You got enemies, Sam? Someone trying to build a case against you?" The implications hit Sam like a physical blow. Someone with money and resources was having him investigated, possibly building a case to remove Isabella and Sophia from his care. But who? And why were they simultaneously providing for the family they might be planning to destroy? That evening, Sam sat the girls down for a serious conversation. At 8 years old now, they'd celebrated their birthday quietly in October, with cake from Mrs. O'Brien and small gifts Sam had managed to afford. Isabella and Sophia were old enough to understand that their situation might not be as secure as they'd believed. "Girls, I need to tell you something important. It's possible that someone might try to take you away from me." Isabella's face went pale. "Who would do that?" "I don't know yet. But someone's been asking questions about us, about whether I'm taking good care of you." Sophia scooted closer to Sam on the narrow bed. "But you are taking good care of us. You're the best papa in the whole world. I know that, and you know that. But sometimes adults make decisions based on things like money and what they think is proper, not on what children want or what makes them happy." Isabella straightened her spine in the way she did when she was preparing to fight. "If someone tries to take us away, we'll tell them we don't want to go. We'll tell them you're our real papa now, and nobody else gets to decide where we live." Sam's throat tightened with emotion. "I hope it doesn't come to that, sweetheart. But I want you both to know that no matter what happens, I will never stop fighting for you. Even if someone takes you away temporarily, I will do everything in my power to bring you home. Promise?" Sophia whispered. "I promise." The confrontation Sam had been dreading came on a bitter December morning when a well-dressed woman stepped off the Denver stage, accompanied by a man in an expensive suit who had the bearing of someone accustomed to getting his way. They made their way directly to Mrs. O'Brien's boarding house, asking to speak with Samuel Carter regarding a matter of significant importance concerning the Rodriguez children. The woman introduced herself as Mrs. Victoria Ashford, and her companion as Mr. Edmund Blackwood, attorney at law from Denver. Mrs. Ashford was perhaps 45, with greying hair styled fashionably and clothes that spoke of wealth and position. But there was something in her eyes, a softness that seemed at odds with the formality of her mission. "Mr. Carter," Mrs. Ashford began as they sat in Mrs. O'Brien's parlour, "I believe you've been wondering about the source of certain assistance you've received recently." Sam's heart hammered against his ribs. "That would be you, then?" "It would. And I suppose you're wondering why someone you've never met would take such an interest in your family's welfare." The thought had occurred to me. Mrs. Ashford glanced at her lawyer, who nodded slightly. "Mr. Carter, I knew Maria Rodriguez." The name hit Sam like a thunderbolt. "The girl's mother?" "Their father's first wife, yes. Maria and I were close. Friends when we were young women. Very close friends." Mrs. Ashford's voice carried weight that suggested their relationship had been more significant than mere friendship. "When she died in childbirth, I wanted to help with the children, but Carlos, their father, was proud. He insisted he could provide for his daughters himself." Sam began to understand. "You've been watching them?" "From a distance, yes. When Carlos was killed, I tried to intervene before the children were placed with that woman, but the legal system moved slowly, and Linda Rodriguez had the advantage of being the legal stepmother." Mrs. Ashford's expression darkened. I've spent the last 8 months trying to undo the damage that woman did, looking for the children after she abandoned them. And you found us. Eventually. And Mr. Carter, I must tell you that when I first learned an unmarried ranch hand had taken in 2 little girls, I was skeptical of his motives. The lawyer, Blackwood, leaned forward. Mrs. Ashford hired investigators to determine whether you were a suitable guardian or whether the children needed to be removed from your care. Sam's jaw tightened. And what did your investigators conclude? Mrs. Ashford smiled for the first time since entering the room. That Isabella and Sophia Carter, they've taken your name, haven't they, are 2 of the happiest, most well-adjusted children anyone has ever seen, that they adore their Papa Sam and feel safer with you than they ever have in their lives, that you've sacrificed everything to give them not just survival, but love. Relief flooded through Sam, followed immediately by confusion. Then why are you here? Because, Mrs. Ashford said gently, I want to help make your family official and permanent, and because I have a proposition that might benefit all of us. What Mrs. Ashford proposed was extraordinary. She owned a large ranch, 30 miles north of Cedar Ridge, a spread that had been profitable before her husband's death 2 years earlier, but was now being mismanaged by hired foremen who cared more about their wages than the health of the livestock and land. I need someone I can trust to run the ranch properly, she explained. Someone with experience, integrity, and a reason to stay. In exchange, I'm offering a house on the property, a substantial salary, and a partnership arrangement that would eventually give you partial ownership of the land. Sam stared at her, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. Why me? Because you've proven that you'll fight for what's important to you, because those children love you and they loved their mother, and that makes you family in a way that matters more than blood. Mrs. Ashford paused. And because I'm getting older, Mr. Carter, I have no children of my own, no close family. I'd like to think that someday when I'm gone, the land I've loved will be cared for by someone who understands what it means to build something lasting. The attorney produced a stack of papers. Mrs. Ashford has also prepared to fund and expedite your adoption of Isabella and Sophia. Full legal adoption, no bureaucratic delays, no questions about your fitness as a guardian. Sam looked at the papers, at the promise of security and stability and a real future for his girls, and felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the offer. This is too much. I can't accept charity on this scale. Mrs. Ashford's expression grew stern. Mr. Carter, this is not charity. This is an investment in 4 people I care about. You, Isabella, Sophia, and myself. I'm offering you work, not a handout. I'm offering those children a permanent home with their chosen father, not temporary housing. And I'm offering myself the peace of mind that comes from knowing my land will be in good hands. That evening, Sam walked alone through the snow-covered streets of Cedar Ridge, thinking about the offer that could change everything. A real ranch, a real income, legal adoption of his daughters, and security for all of them. It seemed too good to be true. But the paperwork was real, the lawyer was legitimate, and Mrs. Ashford's background investigation had confirmed her story about knowing Maria Rodriguez. When he returned to the boarding house, he found Isabella and Sophia waiting up for him, their faces anxious with worry. "Papa," Isabella said immediately, "Mrs. O'Brien said a fancy lady came to see you about us. Are we in trouble?" Sam sat on the bed and gathered both girls close. "No, sweethearts, you're not in trouble. The fancy lady is someone who knew your first mama, and she wants to help us become a real family." "We already are a real family," Sophia said with 8-year-old certainty. "You're absolutely right, but she wants to help make it official so nobody can ever question it again. And she's offered me a job running a big ranch, which would mean we could have our own house." Both girls' eyes went wide. "Our own house," Isabella whispered, "with a yard and maybe a dog and room for a garden, just like we talked about." Sophia bounced excitedly. When can we go?" "Well," Sam said, "first we have to make sure this is what all of us really want. This would be a big change, leaving Cedar Ridge, starting over somewhere new." Isabella considered this seriously. "Would we all be together?" "Always." "Then I don't care where we go, as long as it's with you." Sophia nodded. Emphatically, "Me too." The next morning, Sam met with Mrs. Ashford and Mr. Blackwood to accept their offer. As he signed the papers that would make him foreman of the Ashford Ranch and begin the legal process of adopting Isabella and Sophia, he realized that the mysterious benefactor who had been helping them all winter wasn't a stranger after all. She was family, connected to his daughters by love and loss and the unbreakable bonds that form between people who understand what it means to treasure something precious. Mrs. Ashford had one final surprise. As they prepared to conclude their business, she handed Sam a small wrapped package. "This belonged to Maria," she said softly. "I've been saving it for her daughters." Inside was a delicate silver locket containing a tiny photograph of a young woman with eyes exactly like Isabella and Sophia's. The woman was smiling, and something about her expression suggested she had been deeply loved and had loved deeply. In return, "That's your first mama," Sam told the girls when he showed them the locket that evening. "Mrs. Ashford says she was the kindest, bravest woman she ever knew." Isabella touched the photograph gently. "She's beautiful. Do you think she would have liked you, Papa?" Sam studied the face in the locket, seeing traces of his daughters in every feature. "I think she would have been grateful that someone loves you girls as much as she did." "And we can keep this forever?" Sophia asked. "Forever and always." As Sam tucked his daughters into bed that night, their new winter coats hanging proudly on hooks and the silver locket carefully placed on the small table between their beds, he reflected on the mysterious ways that love and loss and hope could weave together to create something beautiful. Mrs. Ashford had given them more than financial security. She had given them connection to the girls' past and promise for their future. Tomorrow they would begin planning their move to the ranch. Tomorrow their new life would truly begin. But tonight they were simply a family, warm and safe and together, loved by the living and watched over by the dead, blessed by a stranger who wasn't really a stranger at all, and in the gentle breathing of two little girls who called him Papa, Sam heard the sound of all his dreams coming true. The Ashford Ranch stretched across the valley like a patchwork quilt of promise and possibility. As Sam guided the hired wagon up the winding dirt road that led to their new home, Isabella and Sophia pressed their faces against the canvas covering, watching with wide eyes as endless acres of grazing land and snow-capped mountains unfolded before them. The ranch house came into view gradually, a sprawling two-story structure built from local timber and stone, with a wraparound porch and windows that gleamed like jewels in the afternoon sun. "Papa, is that really going to be our house?" Sophia whispered, as if speaking too loudly might make the vision disappear. "The foreman's house is just past the main house," Sam replied, though he was equally awed by the scope of the Ashford spread. "Mrs. Ashford said it has 3 bedrooms and a kitchen bigger than our whole room at Mrs. O'Brien's." Isabella pointed to a large fenced area where several horses grazed peacefully. "Look at all those horses. Are we going to take care of them?" "That's the plan, sweetheart. You girls are going to learn everything there is to know about running a proper ranch." The foreman's house exceeded even Sam's optimistic expectations. Built in the same sturdy style as the main house, but on a more modest scale, it featured real glass windows, a stone fireplace that dominated the front room, and a kitchen with a cast-iron stove that looked like it had never seen a day's use. Upstairs, 2 bedrooms waited under sloped ceilings, each with enough space for proper furniture and personal belongings, luxuries the girls had never experienced. But it was the 3rd bedroom, clearly intended for the ranch foreman himself. That stopped Sam in his tracks. Someone had taken great care to prepare it for his arrival. Clean linens waited on a sturdy oak bed, and new work clothes hung in the wardrobe, shirts and pants and boots in exactly his size. On the small writing desk sat a leather-bound ledger and a note in Mrs. Ashford's careful handwriting. "A new chapter begins today. Write it well." Mrs. Ashford herself appeared within the hour, riding up on a magnificent chestnut mare with the easy grace of someone who had been born to the saddle. At 45, she cut an impressive figure in her practical riding clothes, and Sam could see traces of the woman who had once been young and close to Maria Rodriguez. There was strength in her bearing, but also a warmth that had been carefully hidden during their formal meetings in Cedar Ridge. "Well," she said, dismounting and tying her horse to the porch rail, "what do you think of your new home?" Isabella and Sophia, who had been exploring the downstairs rooms with the enthusiasm of children discovering treasure, came running at the sound of her voice. Their initial shyness around this elegant stranger had given way to curious interest, especially after Sam had explained her connection to their birth mother. "Mrs. Ashford, ma'am," Isabella said with her best manners, "this is the most beautiful house we've ever seen. Thank you for letting us live here." Mrs. Ashford's expression softened noticeably. "You're very welcome, dear. And I think, now that we're going to be neighbors, you might call me Aunt Victoria. Would that be all right?" Both girls nodded eagerly, and Sam felt another piece of their unconventional family structure click into place. Mrs. Ashford, Aunt Victoria, wasn't just their benefactor or his employer. She was choosing to become part of their lives in a way that honored the past while building toward the future. The first weeks at the ranch tested everyone's adaptability. Sam threw himself into learning the operation with the intensity of a man who understood that success meant security for his daughters. The ranch ran 1,500 head of cattle, maintained a breeding program for quarter horses, and employed 12 full-time hands, plus seasonal workers during roundups and drives. The previous foreman had been competent but unimaginative, maintaining the status quo without pushing for improvements or growth. Sam's experience with horses proved invaluable, but managing cattle on this scale required knowledge he didn't yet possess. Fortunately, the ranch's longtime hands, led by a weathered cowboy named Jesse Hawkins, who had worked for the Ashfords for 20 years, were willing to teach a man they respected for his obvious dedication. "You got good instincts," Jesse told Sam after their first week of working together. "And more important, you listen." Last foreman thought he knew everything before he learned anything. The girls adapted to ranch life with the resilience that had seen them through much harder transitions. Isabella appointed herself assistant to Sam's work, following him around the property and asking detailed questions about everything from cattle breeding to fence maintenance. Her quick mind and fearless attitude impressed the ranch hands, who began including her in their discussions and teaching her skills traditionally reserved for boys. Sophia gravitated toward the gentler aspects of ranch life. She showed a natural affinity for the horses, approaching even the most temperamental animals with a calm confidence that made seasoned horsemen take notice. Within days, she had befriended every horse in the stable and learned their individual personalities and preferences. But it was Mrs. Ashford who provided the most unexpected gift, education that went far beyond what the girls could have received. In Cedar Ridge's small schoolhouse, Victoria Ashford had been raised by wealthy parents who believed in educating daughters as thoroughly as sons, and she had maintained an extensive library in the main house along with correspondence courses from universities back east. "Learning shouldn't stop at arithmetic and basic reading," she told Sam one evening as they watched Isabella pore over a geography book while Sophia practiced writing letters in perfect script. "These girls have intelligent minds, and the world is changing. They should be prepared for whatever opportunities come their way." The arrangement they worked out was unconventional, but effective. Mornings were devoted to traditional ranch schooling, Isabella learning bookkeeping and cattle management alongside Sam, Sophia working with the horses and learning veterinary basics from the ranch's visiting doctor. Afternoons were spent in Mrs. Ashford's library, where the girls received instruction in literature, history, mathematics, and even basic French from their cultured benefactor. The legal adoption proceedings moved forward smoothly thanks to Mrs. Ashford's connections and Mr. Blackwood's expertise. By spring, the papers were finalized, making Isabella Carter and Sophia Carter legally and permanently Sam's daughters. The girls insisted on celebrating with a family portrait, their first professional photograph, taken by a traveling photographer Mrs. Ashford had specially commissioned. In the formal portrait, Sam sits proudly in a new suit with Isabella, and Sophia standing on either side of him, their hands resting on his shoulders. All three are smiling with genuine happiness, and around Isabella's neck gleams the silver locket containing their birth mother's photograph. It was a moment that captured not just their appearance, but the depth of their bond and the security they had finally found. Spring brought the ranch's first major test under Sam's management. A late blizzard trapped several hundred head of cattle in a box canyon, and by the time the weather cleared enough for rescue attempts, the animals were weak from exposure and lack of food. Traditional rescue methods would have been slow and risky, potentially resulting in significant losses. Sam proposed a different approach, using the ranch's horses to create relay teams that could break trail through the deep snow, while the men on foot guided the cattle out in small groups. It was dangerous work that required precise coordination, but Sam's growing understanding of both the terrain and his team made it possible. Isabella insisted on helping despite the danger, riding one of the gentler horses to carry supplies and messages between the rescue teams. Her presence actually proved helpful. The cattle responded more calmly to a child's voice than to the shouting of frustrated men, and her small size allowed her to navigate narrow passages that would have challenged adult riders. The operation took 3 days and resulted in saving all but a dozen of the trapped animals. When word of the successful rescue reached town, Sam's reputation as a capable foreman was firmly established. More importantly, the ranch hands who had initially viewed him as an untested outsider now treated him with genuine respect. "You did good out there, boss," Jesse told him as they rode back to the main compound after the last of the cattle had been brought to safety. "Real good. Mr. Ashford himself couldn't have handled it better." The success of the cattle rescue marked a turning point in Sam's relationship with both the ranch and the broader community. Neighboring ranchers began seeking his advice on difficult situations, and Mrs. Ashford started including him in discussions about long-term improvements and expansion plans. But the most significant change was in Sam himself. The man who had once seen himself as a failure, who had lived day to day without hope for anything better, was now planning years into the future. He sketched designs for improved horse training facilities, researched new breeding techniques, and even began corresponding with agricultural colleges about the latest developments in cattle management. The girls flourished in this environment of growth and possibility. Isabella's natural leadership abilities emerged as she began organizing the younger children of ranch workers into games and projects. Her quick mind and fearless spirit made her a favorite among adults and children alike, though Sam sometimes worried about her tendency to take on too much responsibility. Sophia's gentleness with animals evolved into genuine skill as a healer. She learned to assist the veterinarian during his visits, showing an intuitive understanding of animal behavior and medicine that impressed even experienced professionals. Her quiet confidence and natural empathy made frightened animals calm and helped them recover more quickly from injuries or illness. Mrs. Ashford watched these developments with satisfaction and growing affection. What had begun as obligation to an old friend's children had become genuine love for two remarkable girls and deep respect for the man who was raising them so well. "Samuel," she said one evening as they reviewed the ranch's quarterly accounts, "I want to discuss something important with you." Sam looked up from the ledger where he was recording the cattle rescue expenses. "Of course. I've been thinking about the future of this ranch, about what happens when I'm too old to be involved in day-to-day operations." Mrs. Ashford paused, choosing her words carefully. "I'd like to begin transferring ownership to you gradually, with full ownership transferring upon my death." Sam set down his pen, stunned. "Mrs. Ashford, I can't possibly—" "You can, and you will. This ranch needs someone who will love it and care for it properly. It needs someone with children who will grow up understanding the land and wanting to preserve it." She smiled. "Besides, Isabella and Sophia are Maria's daughters. In a very real sense, this was always meant to be theirs." The conversation continued late into the evening as they worked out the legal and practical details of such an arrangement. By the time Sam walked back to the foreman's house, he was the prospective owner of several thousand acres of prime grazing land, a substantial house, and a business that was already profitable and positioned for growth. As he checked on his sleeping daughters before retiring for the night, Sam reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. 18 months ago, he had been a broken-down ranch hand with no family and no prospects. Tonight, he was a successful businessman, the legal father of two remarkable girls, and the heir to a ranch that represented everything he had ever dreamed of achieving. Isabella stirred as he tucked her blankets more securely around her shoulders. "Papa," she whispered sleepily. "Yes, sweetheart. Are we really going to own this whole ranch someday?" Sam smiled in the darkness. "If you want it. If you're willing to work for it and take care of it properly." "I want it," Isabella said with characteristic decisiveness, "and I want to make it the best ranch in all of Colorado. Then that's exactly what we'll do." Sophia's voice came from the other bed, equally sleepy but determined. "And I want to make sure all the animals are always healthy and happy." "That sounds like a perfect plan to me." As Sam finally settled into his own bed, he could hear the gentle sounds of the ranch settling down for the night, horses moving quietly in their stalls, cattle lowing softly in distant pastures, and the ever-present whisper of wind through the pine trees that surrounded their new home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. There would be cattle to move, horses to train, and a dozen decisions that would shape the future of the ranch and his family. But tonight, for the first time in years, Sam fell asleep without worry, confident that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together as a family, on land that was becoming truly theirs. The transformation was complete, not just of their circumstances, but of their hearts. They had found their home, their purpose, and their future in the endless expanse of the Ashford Ranch. And in the quiet darkness of the Colorado night, three souls who had once been lost and alone slept peacefully, surrounded by the promise of all the tomorrows yet to come. 2 years into their life at the Ashford Ranch, the Carter family faced their greatest challenge yet, and it came from the last place Sam expected. A telegram arrived on a scorching July morning that made Sam's hands shake as he read it. Linda Rodriguez filed legal claim for custody. Court hearing scheduled Denver, August 15th. Prepare for fight. Blackwood, Isabella and Sophia, now 10 years old and as much a part of the ranch as the mountains themselves, were helping Sophia tend to a mare who had developed a limp when Sam found them in the stable. His face must have betrayed his distress because Isabella immediately dropped the hoofpick she'd been cleaning and rushed to his side. "Papa, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sam folded the telegram carefully, his mind racing through implications and possibilities. "Girls, we need to have a serious talk. Let's sit down." The three of them settled on hay bales in the cool shade of the stable, while the injured mare munched contentedly on fresh oats nearby. Sam had learned over the years that honesty, even when it was frightening, was always better than false reassurance with these remarkable daughters of his. "Do you remember Linda, your stepmother who left you at the church?" Both girls' faces darkened. Sophia unconsciously moved closer to Isabella, an old protective habit that surfaced whenever their past was mentioned. "She wants us back?" Isabella's voice was flat, emotionless, in the way it became when she was trying very hard not to show fear. "She's claiming she wants you back." "But Isabella, Sophia, I want you to listen to me very carefully. She will never, ever take you away from here, not while I have breath in my body." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "But what if the judge says we have to go with her? What if they don't believe we want to stay?" Sam gathered both girls into his arms, holding them tight against his chest. "Then we'll make sure they understand exactly how we feel about each other. You're my daughters in every way that matters, and I'm your papa. No court in the world can change that." The weeks leading up to the hearing were a whirlwind of preparation and anxiety. Mr. Blackwood arrived at the ranch to help Sam and the girls prepare their testimonies, while Mrs. Ashford used her considerable social connections to gather character, references and documentation of the girls' progress and happiness. But Linda Rodriguez proved to be a more formidable opponent than anyone had anticipated. She arrived in Denver accompanied by her own lawyer and a carefully constructed story of redemption and maternal longing. She claimed that grief over her husband's death had caused temporary mental instability, leading to her unfortunate mistake in leaving the children. Now she insisted she was financially stable, remarried to a prosperous merchant, and desperately wanted to reunite with her beloved stepdaughters. The courtroom was packed on the morning of August 15th. Sam sat at the plaintiff's table with Mr. Blackwood, wearing his finest suit and trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. Behind him, Mrs. Ashford occupied the front row alongside several prominent ranchers who had traveled to Denver specifically to testify on Sam's behalf. Isabella and Sophia sat between Sam and Mrs. Ashford, dressed in their best dresses but looking impossibly small in the formal setting. Isabella maintained her characteristic composure, but Sam could see the tension in her rigid posture. Sophia kept one hand firmly clasped in his, as if physical contact could anchor them together against whatever forces might try to separate them. Linda Rodriguez looked nothing like the woman who had abandoned 2 children at a remote church 3 years earlier. Well-dressed and composed, she presented herself as a respectable matron who had overcome personal difficulties and was ready to reclaim her responsibilities. Her lawyer painted a picture of a reformed woman who deserved a second chance to provide a proper home for children who belonged with their real family. When Linda took the stand, she spoke eloquently about her regrets and her determination to make amends. She described the comfortable home she could provide, the education she could offer, and the stability of her new marriage. Her performance was convincing enough that Sam felt his confidence begin to waver. Then the cross-examination began, and Mr. Blackwood proved why Mrs. Ashford had chosen him to represent their case. "Mrs. Rodriguez, you state that grief caused you to abandon these children. How long after your husband's death did this abandonment occur?" "About 6 months, Linda replied, her composure still intact. 6 months. "And during those 6 months, how did you treat Isabella and Sophia?" Linda's lawyer objected, but the judge allowed the question. Linda's answer was carefully worded. "I provided for their basic needs while struggling with my own emotional difficulties." "I see. And by basic needs, you mean food, shelter, and clothing?" "Yes." Mr. Blackwood consulted his notes. "Did those basic needs include medical care when Sophia developed pneumonia in February of that year?" Linda hesitated. She wasn't seriously ill. According to medical records from Dr. Patterson in Millfield, Sophia was hospitalized for 3 days with severe pneumonia. You were contacted but failed to visit her even once during her hospitalization. Is that correct? I was dealing with my own health issues at the time. The questioning continued methodically, revealing a pattern of neglect, emotional abuse, and financial exploitation that painted Linda Rodriguez in a very different light than her opening testimony had suggested. By the time Mr. Blackwood finished, Linda's careful composure had cracked, and her true character was beginning to show through. When Sam took the stand, he spoke simply and directly about his love for Isabella and Sophia, about the life they had built together, and about his commitment to their future. He didn't try to present himself as perfect, but rather as a man who had found his purpose in being the father these children needed. "Mr. Carter," Linda's lawyer said during cross-examination, "you're an unmarried man with no formal education beyond basic schooling. What qualifies you to raise two young ladies who will soon become women with complex needs?" Sam looked directly at Isabella and Sophia as he answered, "What qualifies me is that I love them unconditionally, that I've proven I'll sacrifice anything for their welfare, and that they've chosen me as their father just as much as I've chosen them as my daughters. As for their complex needs, I think their education, their happiness, and their development over the past 3 years speaks for itself." But it was Isabella herself who delivered the most powerful testimony of the entire hearing. When called to the stand, she walked forward with the confident bearing of someone far older than her 10 years, raised her right hand, and swore to tell the truth with a clear, steady voice. "Isabella," Mr. Blackwood said gently, "do you remember living with Mrs. Rodriguez after your father died?" "Yes, sir." "Can you tell the court about that experience?" Isabella's testimony was devastating in its simple honesty. She described the fear, the hunger, the constant criticism, and the final abandonment without drama or exaggeration. When asked about her life with Sam, her entire demeanor changed, becoming animated and joyful as she talked about learning to manage cattle, about her education with Mrs. Ashford, and about feeling safe and loved for the first time since her birth father's death. "Isabella," Linda's lawyer said during his cross-examination, "don't you think you owe some loyalty to the woman who cared for you after your father died?" Isabella considered the question seriously before answering. "Sir, I think I owe loyalty to people who earn it by taking care of me, not to people who hurt me and then leave me alone in a church." "But Mrs. Rodriguez is your family. Don't you want to be with your real family?" Isabella's response silenced the entire courtroom. "Papa Sam is my real family. He chose us when we needed someone to choose us. He stayed when Mrs. Rodriguez left. He loves us when we're good and when we're bad, and when we're scared and when we're happy. That's what real family does." Sophia's testimony was briefer but equally powerful. Her quiet voice carried absolute conviction as she explained that Papa Sam had taught her to heal animals, had helped her learn to read, and had never, ever made her feel like she was too much trouble or unwanted. When asked if she wanted to live with Mrs. Rodriguez, Sophia's answer was simple. "No, sir, I want to stay with Papa Sam and Isabella and Aunt Victoria on our ranch. That's where I belong." Mrs. Ashford's testimony focused on the girls' remarkable progress and development, their educational achievements, and their integration into the ranch community. She spoke as both an educator and a surrogate grandmother, providing evidence of the stable, nurturing environment Sam had created. But perhaps the most compelling testimony came from an unexpected source. Jesse Hawkins, the weathered cowboy who had worked on the ranch for 20 years, had requested permission to speak on Sam's behalf. His simple, heartfelt words carried the weight of authentic experience. "Your Honor," Jesse said, "I've worked with a lot of men in my time, and I can tell you that Sam Carter is the finest man I've ever known. He turned that ranch around not by being hard or demanding, but by caring about every animal, every person, every blade of grass on the place. And those girls of his, well, They're the pride of the whole community. They work hard, they're respectful, and they're growing up to be the kind of women this territory needs. The judge deliberated for less than an hour. When court reconvened, his decision was swift and unequivocal. This court finds that the best interests of Isabella and Sophia Carter are served by remaining in the custody of their adoptive father, Samuel Carter. Mrs. Rodriguez's petition for custody is denied. The celebration at the ranch that evening was subdued but deeply felt. Sam found himself surrounded by neighbors and friends who had traveled to Denver to support his family, and he was overwhelmed by the depth of community support they had received. But the real celebration happened later, after the guests had gone home, and the three of them sat on the porch of their house, watching the stars emerge over the mountains. No words were necessary. They had faced their greatest threat and emerged stronger than ever. The aftermath of the custody battle brought unexpected opportunities. Word of the case had spread throughout the territory, and Sam found himself receiving inquiries from other ranchers who wanted to learn his methods. His reputation as both a cattleman and a father had grown beyond the boundaries of their valley. More importantly, the trial had forced Isabella and Sophia to articulate their feelings about their family and their future in ways that strengthened their own understanding of what they had built together. They had stood up in court and claimed their chosen family publicly, legally, and permanently. Mrs. Ashford accelerated her plans to transfer ranch ownership to Sam, recognizing that the custody battle had proven his absolute commitment to the land and the children. The legal documents were drawn up to ensure that even if something happened to Sam, Isabella and Sophia would inherit the ranch as full partners. The girls themselves emerged from the experience with new confidence and maturity. Isabella's natural leadership abilities were now tempered with genuine legal knowledge, as she had absorbed every detail of the court proceedings. Sophia's gentle nature had been tested and proven unshakable. Her quiet determination impressed everyone who witnessed her testimony. As autumn arrived and the first snows began to dust the mountain peaks, Sam reflected on how much had changed. Since that terrifying telegram had arrived, the threat of losing his daughters had ultimately strengthened their family bonds and clarified their future in ways that might not have happened otherwise. "Papa," Isabella said one evening as they worked together in the stable, "I've been thinking about what I want to do when I grow up." "Oh, and what's that?" "I want to be a lawyer, like Mr. Blackwood, but better. I want to help families like ours, families that choose each other and love each other, but need someone to fight for them in court." Sam smiled as he watched his daughter's determined expression. "I think you'd make an excellent lawyer, sweetheart. And I think Mr. Blackwood would be honored to help train you." Sophia, who was bandaging a minor cut on a horse's leg, looked up from her work. "And I want to be a veterinarian. A real one, with all the proper training. I want to heal animals and help them, and maybe teach other people how to do it too. Those are wonderful dreams," Sam said, his heart swelling with pride. "And I have no doubt you'll achieve them both." As he tucked his daughters into bed that night, Sam realized that the custody battle had given them something unexpected, clear visions of their futures and the confidence to pursue them. Isabella and Sophia Carter were no longer just survivors of abandonment and trauma. They were young women with ambitions, talents, and the support system to achieve whatever they set their minds to accomplish. The ranch would provide the foundation for their dreams, but those dreams would take them far beyond the boundaries of their valley, and Sam looked forward to watching them soar, knowing that no matter how far they traveled or what they achieved, they would always come home to the place where they had learned that love, loyalty, and family were choices that made people stronger than any biological connection ever could. Their everyday miracle was no longer just about survival or rescue. It had become about transformation, growth, and the infinite possibilities that opened up when children were loved unconditionally and encouraged to become everything they were capable of being. 5 years after the custody battle that had threatened to tear their family apart, the Ashford Ranch had become something no one could have imagined. What started as a place of refuge for a broken cowboy and 2 abandoned children had transformed into one of the most respected cattle operations in all of Colorado Territory. But more importantly, it had become the foundation for dreams that stretched far beyond the boundaries of their valley. Isabella Carter, now 15, stood at the edge of the south pasture, reviewing inventory reports with the precision of someone born to leadership. Her dark hair was braided practically away from her face, and her riding clothes bore the comfortable wear of someone who worked the land every day. But the leather satchel at her side contained correspondence law courses from the University of Denver, and her sharp mind processed legal concepts as easily as cattle counts. "Papa," she called to Sam, who was examining a prize bull they were considering for their breeding program. "The Denver Lawyers Association responded to my inquiry about their mentorship program. They're interested in meeting with me when I turn 16. Sam looked up from the bull, his face breaking into the proud smile that had become his most common expression over the years. At 41, he had grown into his role as both rancher and father, with a confidence that seemed to emanate from his very bones. The failed man who had once seen himself as worthy only of other people's scraps had become someone the territorial governor consulted on agricultural policy. "That's wonderful news, sweetheart. Mrs. Ashford will be thrilled when she hears." Victoria Ashford, now in her 50s, but still riding her beloved chestnut mare with the grace of a woman half her age, had become more than their benefactor or even their honorary aunt. She was Isabella and Sophia's intellectual mentor, Sam's business partner, and the family's connection to a larger world of possibilities. Sophia emerged from the main stable, leading a magnificent black stallion that moved with the fluid grace of an animal in perfect health. At 15, she had developed into a young woman whose gentle touch could calm the most fractious horse, and whose diagnostic skills rivaled those of the territory's best veterinarians. The black stallion, rescued from near death 2 years earlier, now served as living proof of her remarkable abilities. "Thunder's completely recovered from that hoof infection," Sophia reported, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had never met an animal she couldn't help. "Dr. Morrison said he's never seen such a complete healing from such a severe case." The veterinarian from Denver had become a regular visitor to the ranch, drawn initially by reports of Sophia's unusual skills and staying to learn from her intuitive understanding of animal medicine. He had arranged for her to correspond with veterinary colleges back east, and her applications for advanced study were already generating interest from professors who had never encountered such practical knowledge in someone so young. As the 3 of them walked back toward the house for their evening meal, Sam reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The scared, hungry children he had found in that abandoned church had grown into confident young women with clear visions of their futures and the education and support necessary to achieve their dreams. "Tell them about the letter," Sophia said to Isabella with the excitement of someone sharing wonderful news. Isabella's composed demeanor cracked slightly, revealing the young woman beneath the serious exterior. "The territorial legislature is considering a bill that would allow women to practice law in Colorado. If it passes, I could be among the first female lawyers west of the Mississippi." Sam stopped walking, the magnitude of what she was saying hitting him fully. "Isabella, that's extraordinary." "It gets better," Sophia added, bouncing slightly on her toes. "The new veterinary college in Fort Collins has agreed to accept female students starting next year. Dr. Morrison thinks I could complete their program in 3 years instead of 4 because of all my practical experience. They had reached the porch of the main house, where Mrs. Ashford waited with the evening correspondence. The formal arrangement of taking meals in the foreman's house had long since given way to the reality that they were truly one family, sharing everything from daily meals to long-term planning. "Speaking of extraordinary news," Mrs. Ashford said, holding up an official-looking document, "the ranch partnership papers are finalized. Samuel, you are now the majority owner of what is officially being renamed the Carter Ashford Ranch." The celebration that followed was characteristic of their family, quiet, heartfelt, and focused on what the achievement meant for their future rather than the impressive present they had built. As they sat around the kitchen table, sharing Mrs. Ashford's excellent beef stew, Sam looked at the faces of the women who had become his world and felt overwhelmed by gratitude for the path that had led them here. "Do you ever think about that? Morning in the church?" Sophia asked suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. "When you found us?" Sam considered the question seriously. "Every day, but not the way you might think. I don't think about how different things might have been. I think about how perfectly everything worked out, like it was always supposed to happen exactly the way it did." Isabella nodded thoughtfully. "I think about our first mama sometimes, and our papa who died. I think they would be proud of who we've become, and grateful that we found you." Mrs. Ashford reached across the table to touch the silver locket that still hung around Isabella's neck, the same locket containing Maria Rodriguez's photograph that had connected them all those years ago. "I know Maria would be proud. She always believed that love creates family more powerfully than blood ever could." The conversation turned to practical matters: Isabella's correspondence courses, Sophia's veterinary studies, the ranch's expansion plans, and the dozens of decisions that would shape their continued growth. But underneath the practical discussion ran a current of profound contentment, the satisfaction of people who had found their place in the world and were making the most of every opportunity. Later that evening, as Sam walked the property in his nightly routine of checking on the animals and ensuring all was secure, he was joined by his daughters, something that had become tradition over the years. The three of them moved through the familiar landscape of pastures and outbuildings, their conversation ranging from ranch business to philosophical discussions about their dreams and aspirations. "Papa," Isabella said as they paused by the fence, overlooking their prize horses, "do you ever regret not having sons to inherit all this?" Sam laughed, the sound carrying genuine amusement. "Isabella Rose Carter, you and your sister have built this ranch into something I never could have achieved alone. You've both chosen futures that will take you far beyond this valley, but you've also chosen to make this place your foundation and your home. What more could any father ask for?" Sophia pointed to a group of young horses playing in the moonlight. "Besides, who says daughters can't inherit and run ranches? We're proving that women can do anything men can do, and probably do it better." "That," said Mrs. Ashford, emerging from the shadows where she had been checking on a pregnant mare, "is precisely what your birth mother used to say. She believed women could change the world if they were given the education and opportunities to do so." As they made their way back to the house, Sam realized that their everyday miracle had evolved far beyond the simple rescue of 2 abandoned children. It had become a transformation that touched everyone involved, turning a failed rancher into a successful businessman, 2 traumatized children into confident young women with bright futures, and a lonely widow into the heart of a vibrant family. The Carter Ashford Ranch stood as proof that families could be chosen, that love could overcome any obstacle, and that children who were valued and supported could achieve anything they set their minds to accomplish. Isabella would indeed become one of Colorado's first female lawyers, specializing in family law and helping other chosen families navigate legal challenges. Sophia would revolutionize veterinary medicine in the American West, establishing the first veterinary college to fully integrate women as both students and faculty. But perhaps the most important legacy of their unconventional family was the example they set for their community and beyond. They proved that kindness was not weakness, that taking in the abandoned was not charity but wisdom, and that the strongest families were often those built on choice rather than chance. Years later, when historians wrote about the pioneers who shaped the American West, they would include the story of Samuel Carter and his remarkable daughters, not because they conquered territory or struck gold, but because they demonstrated that the greatest treasures were found not in the ground, but in the courage to love unconditionally and the wisdom to recognize that every lost soul deserved a chance to find their way home. The everyday miracle that began in an abandoned church had become a legacy of hope, proving that sometimes the most broken people were the ones best equipped to create something beautiful from the pieces of other people's shattered dreams. And in the endless expanse of the Colorado Territory, under skies as wide as possibility itself, the Carter family continued to build their forever home, one day of love and dedication at a time. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.